The neon pulse of Lumenport never truly flatlined. Even at 3 in the morning, the crescent-shaped bay shimmered with the electric bile of 1,000 holographic advertisements reflecting off the oily water. The city was a sprawling vertical organism of chrome and permacrete clinging to the edge of the continent, like a barnacle that refused to be scraped off. High above the street level, the maglev trains hissed through transparent tubes, carrying the third-shift workers to their stations in the orbital docks. Every few seconds, a massive cargo hauler would punch a hole through the low-hanging smog clouds, its thrusters burning a momentary orange scar into the perpetual twilight of the skyline. Down in the docks district, where the air tasted of ozone and fermented algae, the prevailing philosophy of the era was plastered on every available surface. Efficiency is survival blinked a towering billboard featuring a smiling, four-armed bureaucrat. Do not waste time. Do not waste emotion. Optimize your existence. It was a mantra that Minnie knew by heart. It was written in her bones, or at least that was what the elders of her pack had tried to carve into them. Minnie wiped down the mahogany counter of the Howling Moon with a rag that smelled faintly of lemon and antiseptic. She moved with a fluid, predatory grace that betrayed her biology. She was a star wolf, a species evolved for high-gravity persistence hunting, which meant she stood nearly 7 feet tall, covered in a sleek coat of silver-gray fur that rippled over lean muscle. Her ears, triangular and tufted with black fur, swiveled independently, tracking the ambient noise of the bar, the hum of the atmospheric recyclers, the clink of glass on wood, and the low, rhythmic thrum of a synth jazz track playing from the corner speakers. "You missed a spot," a voice buzzed near her elbow. Minnie did not look down. She flicked her left ear in irritation. "If you are going to critique my cleaning, Zill, you can pay double for your next neutron ale." Zill, an insectoid creature no taller than a barstool, clicked his mandibles together in what passed for a chuckle. "Touchy tonight, wolf girl. The moon phases messing with your hormones." "My hormones are optimized for efficiency," Minnie deadpanned, finally glancing down at him with her striking amber eyes. "Unlike your drinking habits. That is your 5th ale. By my calculations, your motor functions will cease in approximately 10 minutes. I suggest you close your tab." Zill grumbled, his antennae drooping, but he slapped a credit chip onto the counter. Minnie processed it instantly. She did not hate her customers, but she found them exhaustingly messy. They leaked. They spilled. They emoted all over her clean surfaces. The Howling Moon was an anomaly in Lumenport, an old-world-style tavern with actual wooden furniture and stained-glass windows that depicted ancient maritime myths. It was inefficient. It was sentimental. And for reasons Minnie could not quite quantify to her pack matriarch, she had stayed here for 5 years. "Leon," she barked, her voice carrying easily over the din of the remaining patrons. "Table 4 needs a wipe down. And for the love of the stars, do not use the rag for the floor on the table again." From the shadows near the kitchen, swing doors, a young human male stumbled out. Leon. He had been hired 2 weeks ago, and Minnie was still debating whether his employment was a charitable act or a lapse in judgment by the owner. He was slight of build compared to the dock workers, with messy dark hair that defied gravity, and a uniform that always seemed one size too large for him. "Right. Got it, Minnie. Floor rag for floor, table rag for table. Separation of duties. Optimal hygiene." Leon gave her a lopsided grin that was entirely too bright for this time of night. He grabbed a fresh cloth and hurried toward table 4, nearly tripping over his own feet in the process. Minnie watched him with narrowed eyes. Humans were a chaotic variable. They were fragile, short-lived, and prone to leaking fluids when sad or injured. Leon was particularly defective in the coordination department. He had broken 3 glasses in his first shift. Yet, there was something irritatingly functional about him. When he spoke to customers, they stopped shouting. When he accidentally spilled a drink on a grumpy miner, he apologized with such genuine, frantic sincerity that the miner ended up tipping him instead of punching him. It was inefficient. It made no sense. "He is trying hard," said a deep, gravelly voice from the end of the bar. Minnie turned to see Dr. Holloway nursing a glass of amber liquid. The doctor was a retired field medic, a cyborg whose left side was mostly exposed gears and synthetic plating. "Trying does not to clean glass shards off the floor, doctor," Minnie replied, taking the doctor's empty glass. "He is a walking liability. Yesterday I caught him staring at a dust mote floating in a sunbeam for 5 full minutes. I could hear the clock ticking away wages." "Maybe he saw something you didn't," Holloway mused, his mechanical eye whirring as it focused on Leon. The boy was currently scrubbing table 4 with unnecessary vigor, his tongue poking out the corner of his mouth in concentration. "I see everything," Minnie corrected him, her nostrils flaring slightly. "I smell everything. Right now he smells like cheap soap, anxiety, and graphite." She paused, analyzing the scent profile. It was faint, buried under the smell of stale beer, but it was there. A dry, earthy smell. "Graphite," Holloway chuckled. "Maybe he is eating pencils. Humans do strange things when they are calcium deficient." Minnie snorted a sound that was half growl. "Finish your drink, doctor. We are closing in 15 minutes. I want this place sterilized before the sun hits the spire." The night wound down with the agonizing slowness of a dying engine. The last few stragglers, a pair of plant-based beings, photosynthesizing under a UV lamp, and a group of rowdy void pilots finally shuffled out into the neon-drenched streets. Minnie locked the heavy front doors, flipping the sign from open to closed. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigeration units and the distant rhythmic crash of the artificial tides in the bay. "Leon," Minnie called out, turning to survey the empty room. "Front of house is clear. Go check the inventory in the back. If we are low on synthetic gin, mark it down. And do not just guess. Count the bottles." There was no answer. Minnie's ears swiveled toward the kitchen. "Leon!" Silence. She sighed a long exhale that ruffled her whiskers. This was exactly why she preferred automated drones. Drones did not wander off. Drones did not get distracted. Drones did not need bathroom breaks or mental health moments. She tossed her rag into the sanitation bucket and marched toward the back of the bar. The kitchen was empty. The stainless steel surfaces gleamed under the harsh security lights. The back door leading to the alley, where they dumped the recycling, was locked tight. "If he went home without clocking out, I am docking his pay," Minnie muttered to herself. But that did not fit the pattern. Leon was terrified of breaking rules despite his clumsiness. He would not leave without saying goodbye. He was the type of person who said goodbye to the furniture. She moved deeper into the establishment toward the storage room at the very end of the service corridor. It was a windowless concrete box where they kept the kegs, the dry goods, and the broken furniture that the owner refused to throw away because vintage is coming back in style. As she approached the heavy metal door of the storage room, her nose twitched. The smell of the bar was usually a consistent palette stale alcohol cleaning chemicals, damp wood, and the lingering biological musk of a dozen different species. But here, right in front of the door, the air tasted different. It smelled of warmth. Not physical heat, but the olfactory equivalent of a soft blanket. It smelled like nostalgia, like the dust of a library in a dry summer, like the feeling of waking up and realizing you have 1 more hour to sleep. It was a scent profile that made the fur along Minnie's spine lie flat, relaxing muscles she did not know were tense. It was wrong. It was inefficient. Emotions belonged in the brain chemical reactions to stimuli. They should not have a smell that permeated a hallway. Minnie reached for the door handle. It was unlocked. She pushed it open, expecting to find Leon asleep on a sack of grain, or perhaps crying over a broken bottle he was too afraid to tell her about. She was not prepared for the light. The storage room should have been dark, lit only by a single flickering strip on the ceiling. Instead, a soft, ethereal glow emanated from the floor, casting long, dancing shadows against the shelves of kegs. Minnie stepped inside her padded feet, making no sound on the concrete. Leon was there. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, his back to the door. He had cleared a small space between a stack of crate pallets and the recycling bin. Surrounding him was a chaotic halo of debris: cardboard coasters, bottle caps, twisted bits of copper wire from broken appliances, shards of colored glass, and scraps of foil wrappers. It looked like a trash heap. But as Minnie's eyes adjusted, the trash resolved into something else. Leon was holding a coaster, one of the cheap pulp paper ones with the beer logo on it. He was hunched over it, wielding a fine-point ink pen in one hand and a small brush dipped in a mixture of glue and crushed luminous algae in the other. He was not just doodling. He was constructing. He had layered the cardboard, cutting and stacking it to create a three-dimensional relief map. Tiny shards of green glass were glued into the valleys of the cardboard, mimicking the flow of a river. He had used the copper wire to create miniature, impossible architecture rising from the paper surface. And the light, the soft, impossible light, was coming from the algae mixture, which seemed to pulse in rhythm with Leon's own breathing. Minnie took a step forward, and the floorboard creaked. Leon froze. The air in the room shifted instantly. The warm, nostalgic scent vanished, replaced by the sharp, acidic tang of sudden terror. The light on the coaster flickered and dimmed, as if a circuit had been cut. Leon scrambled, his hands flying out to cover the coaster, knocking over a small jar of glue in the process. He spun around, his eyes wide and terrified, looking up at the 7-foot wolf looming over him. I'm sorry," Leon stammered, his voice cracking. He tried to scoop the debris behind his back, looking like a child caught eating sugar straight from the jar. "I finished the inventory, I promise. I just lost track of time. I didn't steal anything, it's just trash. Please don't fire me." Minnie did not speak. She could not. She was staring at the floor where Leon had been sitting. He had not just made one. There were dozens of them. Scattered across the concrete were intricate mosaics made of garbage. One coaster depicted the orbital trajectory of the city's 3 moons, but the lines were drawn with such fluid grace that they looked like music notation. Another was a portrait of Zill, the insectoid regular, but instead of his usual drunken stupor, Leon had captured a moment of quiet dignity in the angle of his antennae, using crushed bottle caps to create the iridescence of his shell. There was a sculpture made of twisted wire and bar napkins that looked like the wind. Not a picture of the wind, but the feeling of wind. Just looking at it made Minnie feel a phantom breeze ruffle the fur behind her ears. "What?" Minnie's voice was a low rumble vibrating in her chest. She took a step closer, ignoring Leon's flinch. "What are these?" Leon swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "They're nothing. Just stupid stuff. I know it's a waste of time. I know, I just—" He looked down at his hands, which were stained with ink and glue. "The city is so loud, Minnie. Everything is so straight and shiny and fast. Sometimes I just need to make something that isn't." Minnie looked from the boy to the objects. Her training, her entire upbringing on the colony world of Fenris Prime, screamed at her. This was the definition of inefficiency. He had spent hours manipulating materials with zero market value into configurations that served no functional purpose. They did not feed anyone. They did not shelter anyone. They did not optimize labor output. But her nose. Her traitorous nose. The smell of the room was overwhelming her. Now that the shock of discovery had faded, the scent of the art was returning, mixing with Leon's fear. The portrait of Zill smelled like fermented honey and resignation. The wire sculpture smelled like freedom and the terrifying drop of a roller coaster. The coaster in Leon's hand, the one he was trying to hide, smelled like Minnie knelt. It was a motion of immense power, constrained by deliberate slowness. She brought her face level with Leon's. Her golden eyes, usually cold and calculating, were wide, the pupils dilated. "Show me," she commanded. It was not a request. Leon hesitated, his hands trembling. Slowly, he revealed the coaster he had been working on. It was a depiction of the bar itself, the howling moon, But Leon had not drawn the walls or the tables. He had drawn the atmosphere. He had used layers of dark paper and bright luminous paint to capture the feeling of a sanctuary in a storm. And in the center, standing behind the bar, was a figure. A wolf. It was Minnie. But it was not the Minnie she saw in the mirror every morning, the efficient, cold, terrifying bartender. The Minnie in the miniature art was glowing. Her fur was rendered with tiny strokes of silver ink that made her look like she was made of starlight. Her eyes were not predatory. They were vigilant, protective. Minnie felt a physical jolt in her chest, as if she had been punched. The coaster smelled of safety. It smelled of belonging. It smelled of the way she secretly felt when the bar was full, and everyone was safe, a feeling she had never admitted to anyone, not even herself. "You," Minnie started, but the words stuck in her throat. She reached out a clawed hand. Leon flinched, expecting a blow, but she only extended one finger, hovering it over the coaster. "Do not touch it yet. It's not dry," Leon whispered, his voice barely audible. Minnie pulled her hand back as if burned. She looked at Leon. Really looked at him. For the first time, she did not see a clumsy waiter or an inefficient human. She saw the source of the anomaly. The stories of her people, the old pack tales that were whispered around fusion heaters during the long winter nights, spoke of this. They warned of the weavers, humans who could manipulate the psychic resonance of inanimate objects. The elders called them dangerous. They said weavers made people feel things they were not supposed to feel, that they disrupted the logical order of the pack hierarchy by introducing chaotic variables like hope or sorrow, where there should only be survival and obedience. "Why are you doing this?" Minnie asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like grinding stones. "You are not selling them. You are not showing them. Why expend the caloric energy?" Leon looked up, meeting her gaze. His fear was fading, replaced by a confused honesty. "Because it hurts if I don't," he said simply. "I look at the trash and I see what it could be. I see the story in it. If I don't let it out, it feels like I'm holding my breath forever. I just think even broken things deserve to be beautiful for a second, right?" Minnie stood up abruptly. The sudden motion made Leon scramble back against the crates. She turned away from him, pacing the small confines of the storage room. Her tail lashed back and forth, knocking a roll of duct tape off a shelf. This was dangerous. This was a violation of the Lumenport statutes on unauthorized psychic tampering, potentially. Or at the very least, it was a violation of the bar's policy on wasting company time. But the smell, that scent of safety radiating from the tiny image of herself. It was intoxicating. It made the knot of tension that lived permanently between her shoulder blades loosen. She looked back at Leon. He was terrified, waiting for the firing squad, waiting for her to drag him by the collar to the nearest peacekeeper drone. Minnie walked back to the pile of art. She reached down and picked up the coaster with her image on it. She held it up to the flickering light. The luminous algae swirled, making the tiny silver wolf look like it was breathing. "You used the top-shelf sealing resin for this," Minnie said, her voice flat. Leon winced. "Yes, just a drop. I'll pay for it. Deduct it from my tips." "It costs 50 credits a bottle," Minnie stated. "You used approximately 3 credits worth." "I'm sorry," Leon whispered. Minnie stared at the art for a long moment. Then she carefully, almost reverently, placed it back on the floor. She looked at Leon, her golden eyes burning with an intensity that made him shrink. "Pack everything up," she said. Leon's shoulders slumped. "I understand. I'll throw it all in the incinerator. I'll clean the floor. I'll be gone by—" "No," Minnie interrupted, her voice sharp. She leaned down, her face inches from his. He could smell the ozone on her fur and the sharp mint of her breath. "I said pack it up. Hide it. Do not throw it away." Her ears swiveled toward the door, checking for intruders before she locked eyes with him again. "If anyone else sees this, if the Efficiency Bureau sees this, they will not just fire you, Leon. They will dissect you." Leon blinked, confusion washing over his face. "What? Why, it's just art." It's just useless crafts." "It is not useless," Minnie hissed the fur on her neck, standing up. "It is." She struggled for the word. Dangerous. Intoxicating. Magic. "It is unauthorized optimization of emotional output." She straightened up, smoothing down her apron, regaining her composure. She was the bartender of the Howling Moon. She was efficient. She was in control. "Get up," she commanded. "Put these in a box. Take them to your quarters. Do not bring them out during shift hours. Do not show the customers. Do not show the doctor." Leon scrambled to his feet, grabbing a nearby empty crate and frantically loading his creations into it. Okay, Minnie, I swear. I won't do it again." "I did not say stop doing it," Minnie said quietly. Leon paused, a half-finished wire sculpture in his hand. He looked at her, stunned. Minnie refused to meet his eyes. She walked to the door of the storage room and placed her hand on the frame. She felt a strange vibration in her fingertips, a residual hum from the energy Leon had poured into the room. "Go home, Leon," she said, not looking back. "Get some sleep. You look like a raccoon with a caffeine addiction." "Minnie," Leon called out softly as she stepped into the hallway. She paused. "Thanks," he said. The word carried a scent of gratitude so strong it almost made Minnie sneeze. "Tomorrow," Minnie said, staring into the darkness of the empty bar. "We need to talk about what you are doing, and you are going to explain to me why the picture of me smells like cinnamon and ozone." She slammed the door shut behind her, leaving Leon alone with his glowing trash and the lingering echo of her words. Minnie marched back to the bar, her heart hammering a rhythm that was entirely too fast, entirely inefficient. She picked up a rag and started wiping a spot on the counter that was already clean. She scrubbed harder and harder, trying to erase the image of the silver wolf from her mind. But she could still smell it, the safety, the warmth, the terrible, beautiful uselessness of it all. She looked out the window, at the neon skyline of Lumenport, at the slogans of efficiency blinking in the distance. For the first time in 100 years, the city looked different to her. It looked brittle. It looked gray. It looked like it needed a splash of paint. Minnie growled low in her throat, a sound of frustration and anticipation. She had a problem. A messy, human-shaped problem with ink on his fingers. And for the life of her, she could not figure out the most efficient way to solve it. Which meant, she realized with a terrifying jolt of excitement, she was just going to have to improvise. The morning sun of Lumenport was not a gentle awakening. It was a tactical assault. The star around which the planet orbited was a harsh white dwarf that stripped the color out of the streets, leaving everything in stark high contrast. As Leon walked toward the Howling Moon, the city screamed at him. Every vertical surface was covered in active hololiths. Sleep is a resource. Spend it wisely flashed a 50-foot ad for a sleep compression chamber. Why walk when you can arrive? Teleportation nodes. Now, with 99% survival rate, boasted another. The pedestrians around him moved with terrifying purpose. A 4-armed dock worker was reading 3 data slates simultaneously while power walking. A group of cybernetically enhanced brokers were conducting a silent meeting via neural link, their eyes glazed over as they rushed toward the financial spire. Leon felt small. He felt slow. He felt, in a word, inefficient. His stomach was doing slow, nauseating somersaults. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the towering silhouette of Minnie, standing in the doorway of the storage room, the golden light of his useless art reflecting in her predatory eyes. She had told him to go home. She had told him not to throw the art away. But she had also said they needed to talk. In Lumenport, "We need to talk" usually was a prelude to, "You are being liquidated for failing to meet quota." He reached the heavy wooden door of the Howling Moon. It looked out of place on the sleek chrome street, like a relic from a forgotten timeline. Leon took a deep breath, checked his reflection in the brass handle. His hair was fighting a losing battle against gravity, and pushed inside. The bar was dim, a welcome relief from the aggressive daylight. Minnie was already there. She stood behind the bar, methodically polishing a row of crystal tumblers. The morning light filtering through the stained glass cast kaleidoscope patterns on her silver fur. She looked majestic. She also looked terrifying. "You are early," Minnie said without looking up. 3 minutes and 14 seconds early. That is an improvement. Leon froze halfway to the staff locker room. "Morning, Minnie. I just wanted to make sure everything was ready for the lunch rush." Minnie finally raised her eyes. They were unreadable. She placed the glass down and picked up another. "The inventory count was accurate last night," she said. Her voice was level devoid of the growl that usually accompanied her reprimands. "You even categorized the vintage synthetics by year. Most humans ignore the expiration dates on the blue algae wine." "I like the way the bottles look when they are lined up by color," Leon blurted out, then immediately regretted it. "I mean for efficiency, easier to grab." Minnie's left ear swiveled toward him. "Go change. Today you are not waiting tables. You are behind the bar with me." Leon blinked. "I am, but I break things. You said my hands have a vendetta against gravity." "I am conducting an experiment," Minnie said, turning her back to him to adjust the pressure on the ale taps. "Do not make me repeat myself." The lunch shift was a chaotic blur. The howling moon was popular with the midday crowd who wanted to escape the relentless optimization of their workplaces. Leon stood shoulder to shoulder with Minnie, a comical contrast in size and grace. While Minnie moved like liquid mercury, pouring 3 drinks simultaneously with effortless precision, Leon looked like he was defusing a bomb every time he mixed a cocktail. Yet Minnie did not yell. She watched. She watched as a harried transport pilot slammed his hands on the bar, demanding a drink to forget his schedule. Minnie would have simply served him a numbing agent and moved on. Leon, however, paused. He noticed the pilot's trembling hands. He mixed the drink, but he added a garnish, a simple twist of citrus peel cut into the shape of a wing. "Rough thermal currents over the equator today, right?" Leon asked softly as he slid the drink over. The pilot stopped. He looked at the citrus wing. He looked at Leon. The tension in his shoulders dropped 2 inches. "Yeah," the pilot exhaled. "Yeah, nearly lost an engine. Thanks, kid." She watched as a young photosynthetic girl came in wilting and gray. Leon served her a glass of mineral water, but before he gave it to her, he arranged the ice cubes so they clinked in a melodic rhythm, smiling at her, until she smiled back her leaves, turning a shade greener. It was inefficient. The conversation added 40 seconds to the transaction time. The ice arrangement served no nutritional purpose, but the pilot tipped 30%. The plant girl ordered a second glass. During a lull in the afternoon, Minnie wiped her hands on a towel and nudged Leon toward the far end of the bar, away from the few lingering customers. "You are terrible at measuring," she stated flatly. "You poured 5 milliliters too much gin in that last martini." "I'm sorry," Leon said, reaching for a rag to nervously clean a spot that did not exist. "I'll pay for the overage." However, Minnie continued, ignoring his apology. The customer did not complain. In fact, his cortisol levels dropped by 15% after he spoke to you. I could smell it. Leon looked up surprised. "You can smell cortisol." "I can smell everything, Leon. I can smell the rust on the door hinges. I can smell the rain coming 3 days from now. And last night," she paused, her amber eyes locking onto his. "Last night in the storage room, I smelled something I have not smelled since I was a pup." Leon went still. This was it. The firing. "Why?" Minnie asked. It was not an accusation, but a genuine inquiry that seemed to struggle its way out of her throat. "Why do you humans make things that do not do anything? Why spend hours gluing trash together just to look at it?" Leon leaned back against the counter, tracing the grain of the wood with his finger. "It's not about what it does, Minnie. It's about what it says. or what it makes you feel. Feelings are chemical reactions, Minnie countered. They are biological indicators of status threat or mating potential. They are not products to be manufactured. Are they? Leon challenged gently. When you hear a song, do you just hear math frequency and rhythm? Or do you hear sadness or joy? I hear noise, Minnie said, but her ear twitched. A tell. Back on Earth, Leon said, his voice taking on a distant quality. Before I came here, people used to make things all the time. Bad things. Good things. We drew on walls. We carved wood. My grandmother used to knit sweaters for teapots. A teapot doesn't get cold, Minnie. But she did it because it made the tea feel warmer. It made the kitchen feel like home. He looked at her. I think I just want to make things that tell the truth, even if they're made of garbage. Because sometimes the truth is messy, and you can't put it in a spreadsheet. Minnie looked away. She stared at the rows of bottles, her reflection distorted in the glass. On Fenris Prime, she began, her voice low. We are born into a caste. Hunter, builder, caretaker. We are tested at 3 months old. Our path is set. It is efficient. It ensures the pack survives the long winters. She picked up a coaster, flipping it over in her large clawed hands. When I was small before my designation, I found a vein of blue ochre in the back of the nursery cave. I did not know what it was. I just liked the color. It looked like the sky during the midsummer thaw. I spent 3 days grinding it down, mixing it with saliva. I drew a shape on the wall. It was not a map. It was not a warning. It was just a circle, a blue circle that looked like the moon. Leon watched her fascinated. The imposing armored bartender suddenly looked very young. What happened? He asked. The matriarch found me, Minnie said, her tone hardening. She made me scrub it off until my paws bled. She told me that in the time it took to draw a circle, I could have learned to track a snow hare. She said beauty without function is a weakness. It distracts the hunter. It endangers the pack. She crushed the cardboard coaster in her hand without realizing it. I became a very good hunter. I never drew again. That's terrible, Leon whispered. Minnie shrugged, the movement stiff. It was necessary. Fenris is a harsh world. We do not have the luxury of tea sweaters. She turned back to him, her expression softening just a fraction. But last night when I saw your useless little trash sculpture, it did not smell like weakness, Leon. It smelled like that blue ochre. It smelled like the only time in my life I did something just for me. The air between them grew thick, charged with a strange magnetic tension. It was not the spark of a romance novel, but the grinding friction of two tectonic plates, logic and emotion shifting against each other. So, Leon said, a small, daring smile playing on his lips. You're saying my trash is better than your hunting, Minnie snorted, flicking him on the forehead with a finger. It felt like being hit by a small hammer. Do not push your luck, human. My hunting put meat on the table. Your trash just makes me want to sneeze. But you kept it, Leon pointed out. You didn't incinerate it. I am waiting for the market value of recycled cardboard to go up, Minnie lied smoothly. Now get back to work. Table 6 needs cleaning, and if you use the floor rag, I will bite you. The truce held for 3 days. It was a fragile thing built on shared glances, and the unspoken agreement that Leon's hobby was a secret they were both keeping from the universe. Then came the announcement. The owner of the Howling Moon, a nervous, gelatinous entity named Mr. Gloop, floated into the bar one afternoon, vibrating with anxiety. Big news, huge news, optimal news. Mr. Gloop bubbled his translation collar, screeching slightly. The City Council has announced Balance Night, a celebration of productivity and civic harmony. Every establishment must participate. Minnie looked up from her ledger. Balance Night. Is that the event where the guilds march around congratulating themselves on how boring they are? No, well, yes, but it is important. Mr. Gloop wobbled. The Guild of Balanced Commerce is awarding the Balanced Venue label to the establishment that best demonstrates the integration of efficiency and service. Do you know what that label means? Mini-tax breaks priority energy allocation. We need it. Mr. Gloop spun, or rather sloshed, toward Leon. And you. The agency says you have creative aptitudes on your file. Something about graphic design before you left Earth. Leon froze. I dabbled. A little. Perfect, excellent, optimal. Mr. Gloop produced a data slate. We need a poster. Something to display in the window for Balance Night. Something that says, "The Howling Moon, where thirst is quenched with maximum precision." Leon took the slate. Okay, I can do that. I could draw the moon maybe with some interesting light refracting off the water, representing the diversity of... No. Mr. Gloop interrupted, turning a darker shade of green. Stick to the template, boy. Here, look. He tapped the slate, bringing up a generic sterile image of two geometric shapes, shaking hands under a grid. Use the Guild's approved font. Use the Guild's approved color palette, gray, beige, and calm blue. Do not get fancy. Guests like familiarity. If you surprise them, they might get indigestion. Just copy this, put our name on it, and print it. Efficiency. Leon stared at the slate. It was hideous. It was soulless. It was everything he hated about Lumenport condensed into a JPEG. But, Leon started. Great, have it done by tonight. Mr. Gloop cheered, then liquefied himself and slid down the drainage pipe to his office in the basement. Leon stood there holding the slate like it was radioactive. He looked at Minnie. Don't look at me, Minnie said, though her ears were flat against her head. He pays the wages. Just draw the beige boxes, Leon. Leon sat in the corner for hours, dragging digital lines across the screen. It was physically painful. Every time he tried to add a little flair, a curve to a letter, a shadow to a box, he remembered Gloop's warning. Don't surprise them. He deleted the flare. He made the boxes square. He made the blue calm. By the time evening came, the poster was done. It was perfect. It was perfectly dead. It looks adequate, Minnie said, hanging it in the window. It blends in with every other window on the street. Yeah, Leon muttered, wiping his ink-stained hands on his apron. That's the point. The night of the unveiling was busy. The pre-festival crowd was out in force. The bar was packed with dockworkers, miners, and clerks, all looking for a brief respite. But the atmosphere was stiff. The Balance Night propaganda was working. Everyone seemed to be drinking with a grim determination to be relaxed, which paradoxically made them more stressed. Leon moved through the crowd carrying a tray of drinks. He felt like a ghost. He had spent the day suppressing his instincts, turning off the part of his brain that saw shapes and stories just to make that horrible poster. He felt gray. He reached a table in the back. It was occupied by the regulars Zill, the insectoid, the plant girl whose name was Photosyn 3, and a large, rock-skinned miner named Korg. They were sitting in silence, staring at their drinks. Here you go, Leon said, setting down their ales. Neutron ale for Zill mineral water, with extra nitrates for 3, and rocks on the rocks for Korg. Thanks, kid, Korg grunted. Poster looks nice. Very straight lines. Thanks, Leon said, his voice hollow. He looked at the table. It was a mess of condensation rings, wet overlapping circles. Useless. Something snapped in Leon's chest. A tiny rebellious wire broke. Wait, Leon said. He reached into his apron pocket. Against Minnie's orders, against his own promise, he had brought them. He had slipped 3 of his hand-drawn coasters into his pocket before his shift. He didn't know why. Maybe just to feel the texture of the paper against his hip. I made these, Leon said, his voice trembling. The wet glass ruins the wood. Here. He slid a coaster under Zill's glass. It was not the beige square of the Guild. It was a drawing of a nebula swirled with iridescent ink that Leon had extracted from beetles. But in the center of the nebula was a tiny stylized depiction of a beer mug. Zill looked down. His compound eyes clicked. Is that the hive cluster? Yeah, Leon whispered. You told me you were born there, that you missed the way the dust storm smelled. Zill went very still. He reached out a pincer and touched the edge of the coaster. Leon slid the second one to Korg. It was a heavy, thick piece of card painted to look like layers of geological strata, with a small pickaxe resting in a vein of gold. Korg stared at it. His rock skin seemed to soften, the cracks glowing faintly. The third one went to Photosyn 3. It was a delicate watercolor of a sunbeam hitting a single drop of dew. Oh, 3 breathed. The sound was like wind in high branches. The change was instantaneous. Minnie, standing behind the bar 30 feet away, dropped a lemon. The smell hit her like a physical wave. The stale scent of efficient relaxation vanished. In its place bloomed a garden of aromas. Zill's table smelled of ancient dust and home. Korg's smelled of triumph and deep earth. 3's smelled of pure, unadulterated sunlight. But it wasn't just the smell. The sound of the bar changed. The low, polite murmur was pierced by a laugh, a loud, barking laugh from Korg. I remember this, Korg shouted, tapping the coaster. My grandfather used a pick like this. We dug out the magnesium core in the Sector 7 belt, 3 days without air. Just determination. The dust storms, Zill chittered, his antennae vibrating. They sang. They did not just blow, they sang. Like this, 3 asked, and then she began to hum. It was a high resonant sound, a melody that wove through the smoke and the noise. Heads turned. At other tables, people stopped looking at their data slates. The gloomy atmosphere shattered. People started leaning in, asking what was happening. Korg held up his coaster like a trophy. Zill was crying, actual viscous tears leaking from his eyes, but he was smiling with his mandibles. Leon stood there terrified and exhilaratingly alive. He had done it. He had broken the gray. Leon. The hiss came from behind him. He spun around to see Minnie looming over him. She looked frantic. What did you do? She demanded, grabbing his shoulder. The olfactory levels in here just spiked by 400%. It smells like a sentimentality bomb went off. I just gave them coasters. Leon defended himself, though. He couldn't stop grinning. Look at them, Minnie. They're happy. They're actually happy, not just optimally satisfied. It is too much, Minnie warned, her eyes darting to the front of the room. You are drawing attention. She was right. Near the entrance, a man had stood up. He was wearing the stiff, high-collared gray suit of the Balance Guild. He was holding a sensor device, and he was frowning deeply at the reading. That is an auditor, Minnie whispered, her grip on Leon tightening. If he traces this spike to you. The auditor began to move toward Korg's table, his face set in a mask of bureaucratic disapproval. Leon panicked. He's going to see the art. He's going to report me. Minnie made a decision. She shoved Leon behind her. Leave it to me, she growled. She stalked toward the table, intercepting the auditor just as he reached for Korg's coaster. Excuse me, sir, Minnie boomed, her voice projecting to the back of the room. She drew herself up to her full 7-foot height, looking every inch the apex predator. Is there a problem with the service? The auditor blinked, intimidated despite himself. My sensors detect an unauthorized fluctuation in the emotional ambient levels. This establishment is exceeding the calm variance limits. He pointed a shaking finger at Korg. That patron is exhibiting excessive nostalgia. It is disruptive. Minnie leaned down, baring her teeth in a smile that was 90% threat. That patron, she lied smoothly, is reacting to our new experimental ingredient, spicy swamp root. It induces mild hallucinations of the past. Totally legal. Very expensive. Would you like a sample? It clears the sinuses. The auditor paled. Spicy swamp root, I don't. That is not in the protocol. Then I suggest you let my customers enjoy their beverages, Minnie rumbled. Unless you want to file a complaint about the culinary heritage of the swamp sector, The last person who did that was eaten by a diplomat. The auditor swallowed hard. He looked at Minnie's claws, which were resting casually on the table next to the coaster. He looked at Korg, who was glaring at him. I see. Carry on, but keep the moisture levels down. The auditor retreated, scurrying out of the bar as fast as his dignity allowed. Minnie let out a breath she had been holding. She snatched the coaster from under Korg's drink before he could protest. Hey, Korg grunted. Shift is over for this one, Minnie said sharply. Drink your ale. She marched back to the bar, dragging Leon by the apron strings into the kitchen. That, she hissed, pinning him against the refrigerator, was reckless, stupid, inefficient. It worked, Leon breathed, his heart racing. Did you feel it, Minnie? For a minute, nobody was tired. Minnie looked at him. She was holding the coaster, the one with the geological strata. Her thumb brushed over the paint. She could still smell the joy coming off it, fading now, but lingering like perfume. Yes, she admitted softly. I felt it. She looked at Leon, her expression complicated. You are dangerous, Leon. You make people forget the rules. Maybe the rules are boring, Leon said, emboldened by the adrenaline. Minnie stared at him for a long moment. Then she shoved the coaster into his chest. Hide it. If Gloop finds out you are sabotaging his balance night chances, he will turn you into protein paste. But she didn't report him. Later that night, after the bar had closed and the cleaning drones were humming across the floor, Minnie found Leon on the rooftop terrace. The wind off the bay was cold, carrying the salt of the ocean and the metallic tang of the maglev trains. Below them, Lumenport sprawled like a circuit board lights, blinking in precise, programmed patterns. Leon was leaning on the railing, looking down. You should go home, Minnie said, stepping up beside him. She did not look at him, but kept her eyes on the horizon. Minnie, Leon said quietly. Do you ever think about the cave? Minnie stiffened. The cave is in the past. The blue circle, Leon pressed. Do you ever think, what if you had finished it? What if you had drawn a whole sky? Then I would have starved, Minnie said automatically. A wolf who draws does not eat. But you're not on Fenris anymore, Leon said. He turned to face her. The wind whipped his messy hair across his eyes. You're here. You're a bartender. You serve drinks to bugs and rocks. It's not exactly hunting, is it? Minnie looked at him. In the moonlight, her silver fur seemed to glow. What are you asking, human? I'm asking, Leon said, if you ever want to make something just because it's beautiful. Not because it's useful. Not because it feeds the pack. Just because it deserves to exist. Minnie opened her mouth to give the standard answer. No. Inefficiency is death. But the words died on her tongue. She thought of the coaster with the silver wolf. She thought of the smell of cinnamon and safety. She thought of the way the bar had felt tonight, alive, messy, real. I think, Minnie said slowly, choosing her words with agonizing care, that if I did, I would be terrified. Yeah, Leon smiled, a sad, crooked smile. Me too. The wind is picking up, Minnie said abruptly, turning away from the railing. Go home, Leon. Tomorrow is balance night. The real one. If you pull a stunt like that when the guildmasters are here. I won't, Leon lied. Good, Minnie lied back. She walked to the door of the stairwell, then paused. Leon. Yeah, the nebula, she said, not looking back. On the Bugs coaster, you got the color wrong. The hive cluster is more purple. She disappeared down the stairs. Leon stood alone on the roof, looking at the city that wanted him to be a machine. He touched the pocket where his pens were hidden. He knew he should stop. He knew it was dangerous. But he also knew that purple was a very easy color to mix. And down in the darkness of the stairwell, Minnie leaned against the wall, listening to the beat of two hearts, hers and the humans on the roof. She lifted her hand and looked at her claws. For a fleeting second, she didn't see weapons. She saw tools, tools that could perhaps hold a brush. The thought terrified her more than any monster on Fenris Prime. Balance night was coming. And Minnie had a sinking feeling that the scales were about to break. Balance night descended upon Lumenport like a heavy beige blanket. The city council had promised a celebration of equilibrium, a night where the chaotic energies of the port city would be smoothed out into a predictable, productive hum. To ensure this, the Guild of Balanced Commerce had issued strict decoration guidelines. The howling moon had been sterilized. Gone were the flickering, warm-hued lanterns that usually hung from the rafters, replaced by standard-issue, calm white lighting strips that eliminated all shadows and made everyone's skin look slightly gray. The smell of old wood and spices had been scrubbed away, overpowered by an aerosol spray called Neutral Breeze, which smelled of absolutely nothing. And then there were the posters. Leon stood by the service station, adjusting his collar, which felt too tight. He stared at the window. There, taped to the glass, was his creation. The beige square, the calm blue font, the generic handshake. It was the visual equivalent of lukewarm water. Nutritional intake is the key to longevity, read a placard on the bar. Conversation is an exchange of data. Keep it concise. I hate it, Minnie said. She was standing next to him, her silver fur looking dull under the harsh lights. She had been forced to remove her usual leather apron, replacing it with the guild-mandated uniform, a stiff, synthetic tunic, in a color that could only be described as administrative slate. It is efficient, Leon said, parroting the line Mr. Gloop had fed him earlier. It minimizes visual distraction. It minimizes my will to live, Minnie growled softly. She picked up a glass, checked it for spots, and set it down. The acoustic dampeners they installed in the ceiling are absorbing 70% of the ambient noise. It is too quiet. I can hear the refrigeration unit humming in the basement. I can hear your heart beating, Leon. It is going 110 beats per minute. That is a waste of metabolic energy. I'm nervous, Leon admitted, wiping his palms on his trousers. You should be, Minnie said, her ears swiveling toward the door. He is here. The entrance of the bar slid open, and a hush fell over the room that had nothing to do with the acoustic dampeners. Corin had arrived. He was a human man of indeterminate middle age, dressed in the high-collared, pristine robes of a senior adjudicator for the Balance Guild. He did not walk. He glided, his movements economical and precise. He held a sensory slate in one hand, his eyes scanning the data stream with the intensity of a bomb disposal technician. Corin was a legend in Lumenport, but not the kind you told stories about over a beer. He was the man who had shut down the Fire Dancer Festival 3 years ago because the fluctuating heat levels were deemed inefficient for the local climate control systems. He believed that emotion left unchecked was entropy. He believed that art was only useful if it could be put on a spreadsheet. He stopped in the center of the room, turning slowly. He looked at the beige posters. He looked at the nutritional placards. He nodded once. A single, sharp motion. Acceptable, Corin said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. The visual variance is within the 0.5% tolerance range. He walked toward the bar. Minnie straightened her spine, towering over him, but Corin did not seem intimidated. He looked at her with the clinical detachment of a mechanic inspecting a piston. Bartender, Corin said. 1 standard ration of hydration plus. Room temperature, no garnish. Coming right up, Minnie said. Her voice was flat. She poured the water. She did not slam the glass down. She placed it with perfect soulless precision on a generic absorbent square of white paper. Corin took a sip. Adequate. He turned his back to the bar, surveying the room. The customers were filtering in now. Dock workers, miners, clerks. They sat at the tables looking uncomfortable. They spoke in hushed tones. They drank their beverages quickly, eyes darting to the nutritional charts. It was a room full of people trying desperately to look like they were having a moderate amount of fun. Leon moved among the tables, clutching his tray. He felt like a ghost. Evening, sir, Leon said to a rock-skinned miner. Would you like to initiate a transaction for a beverage? The miner looked at him with sad, craggy eyes. "Just a beer, kid. And never mind." "Never mind what?" Leon asked automatically. "I was going to ask for the extra foam," the miner muttered. "But the chart says foam is just wasted volume. Just give me the liquid." Leon poured the beer. No foam. He set it down. The miner drank it like medicine. Leon retreated to the kitchen. He stood there, leaning against the cold, stainless steel counter, breathing hard. He felt sick. He felt like he was erasing himself one interaction at a time. This wasn't peace. This wasn't balance. This was a slow suffocation. He looked at the shelf above the sink. There, shoved behind a box of napkins, was a small, battered crate. His hands shook as he reached for it. He shouldn't. Minnie had warned him. Gloop had threatened him. The city had practically outlawed it. He opened the lid. Inside lay the coasters he had made over the last week. They weren't just drawings. They were anchors. There was one he had made for a homesick avian navigator, a swirl of blues and whites that looked like the cloud currents of a gas giant. There was one for an old mechanic who had lost his wife, a simple, warm sketch of two hands, clasping, made of copper wire and amber resin. Leon touched the copper wire. A spark of warmth traveled up his arm. It felt real. It felt like the only real thing in the entire building. Leon. He jumped, nearly dropping the crate. Zill, the insectoid regular, was standing in the kitchen doorway. His usually frantic antennae were drooping. His compound eyes looked dull. "Zill," Leon whispered. "You can't be back here. The regulations—" "I cannot take it, Leon." Zill clicked his voice, a miserable buzz. "The quiet. It is eating my head. The air out there, it tastes like static. Please. Do you have the other things?" Behind Zill, two more figures appeared. It was Korg the miner, and a young woman Leon didn't know, a human with tired eyes and hands stained with engine grease. "We heard," the woman whispered. "We heard about the night with the nebula. My brother was there. He said he slept for 8 hours straight afterward. He hasn't done that since the accident." She looked at Leon with desperate hope. "Please, just one. We don't need a show. We just need to breathe." Leon looked at the box. He looked at the sterile gray light reflecting off the kitchen surfaces. He remembered why he had started drawing in the first place. Back on Earth, in the crowded, noisy orphanage, he had drawn windows on the walls so the other kids could pretend they saw the ocean. He had drawn fires in the hearth so they could pretend to be warm. It wasn't about being an artist. It was about survival. "Okay," Leon said. The word was barely a whisper, but it felt like a shout. "Okay. Go back to your tables. Act normal." He grabbed a handful of the modified coasters. He hid them under a stack of the standard white napkins on his tray. He walked out into the bar. Corin was still standing in the center of the room, making notes on his slate. He was currently measuring the decibel level of a conversation between two traders. Leon moved to the back corner, the blind spot Minnie had once pointed out to him. He approached the table where Zill, Korg and the woman were sitting. "Standard beverages," Leon said loudly, for the benefit of anyone listening. "Efficient delivery." He set down the drinks. And then, with a sleight of hand he had practiced 1,000 times with coins, he slid the special coasters under the glasses. For Zill, the cloud currents. For Korg, a textured relief of a mountain root, deep and unshakable. For the woman, he chose a new one. He had finished yesterday, a depiction of a grease-stained flower growing out of a gear. The reaction was immediate. It wasn't a sound. It was a shift in pressure. The woman touched the coaster. Her shoulders, which had been hunched up by her ears, dropped 3 inches. She let out a long, shuddering breath. It wasn't a sigh. It was the sound of a heavy weight hitting the floor. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, that's my garden. The one I had before I left home." Korg ran a stone finger over the mountain root. "Solid," he grunted. But his voice wasn't flat anymore. It had timbre. It had resonance. "Stone remembers," Zil didn't speak. He just leaned his head down, resting his forehead near the cloud currents, and his antennae began to vibrate with a soft, happy hum. The air around the table changed. The neutral breeze scent was pushed back by the smell of ozone, wet earth, and engine oil. Leon moved to the next table. He couldn't stop. It was addictive. He slid a coaster depicting a binary sunset under the drink of an elderly couple. They looked at each other, really looked at each other, and smiled. He slid a coaster with a stylized flame under the glass of a freezing cold dock worker. The man stopped shivering. The bar began to wake up. The acoustic dampeners couldn't handle it. A laugh broke out, real raucous laughter from the elderly couple. Someone started tapping a rhythm on the table. The gray pallor on people's faces began to flush with color. Minnie, behind the bar, felt the hair on her arms stand up. She smelled it. It wasn't just individual scents anymore. It was a symphony. It smelled like a bakery opening in the morning. It smelled like a thunderstorm breaking a heat wave. It smelled like life. She looked at Leon. He was moving through the room like a weaver, threading an invisible golden string between the tables. He didn't look like a clumsy waiter anymore. He looked functional. But Corin had sensors. The device in Corin's hand let out a sharp, piercing beep. Then another. Then a continuous, angry whine. Corin froze. He stared at the screen. The red line was spiking off the chart. "Impossible," Corin muttered. He tapped the device. "Sensor malfunction." He looked up, and he saw it. He saw the woman crying but smiling through the tears. He saw the miner laughing. He saw the warmth radiating from the corners of the room, melting the carefully curated sterility. His eyes locked onto Leon. Leon had just placed a coaster on the central table. He was backing away, a guilty, triumphant look on his face. "You," Corin said. The word cut through the laughter like a knife. The room went silent. Corin marched toward Leon. The crowd parted, sensing the danger radiating from the adjudicator. "Stop right there," Corin commanded. Leon froze. He clutched the empty tray to his chest like a shield. Corin reached the table Leon had just served. He looked down at the glass. It was resting on a piece of cardboard painted with swirling, chaotic lines of gold and crimson. It looked like a heart beating. "What is this?" Corin demanded, his voice rising. "This object is emitting a high-frequency psychoactive resonance. It is unregulated. It is non-standard." He looked at Leon with cold fury. "You are introducing emotional contaminants into a balanced venue." "It's just a drawing," Leon stammered, his courage wavering under Corin's glare. "It's just art." "Art," Corin spat the word like it was poison. "Art is a variable. Variables cause conflict. Look at them." He gestured wildly at the woman who had been crying. "She is weeping. You have caused distress. You have disrupted her equilibrium." "She's happy," Leon argued, his voice cracking. "She's crying because she's relieved, because she remembered who she was." "She is inefficient," Corin shouted. "She is compromised and you are infected." Corin stepped closer, looming over Leon. "I am confiscating these items, and you will be cited for inciting collective instability. You will be removed from the city, boy." "We do not tolerate chaos agents." Leon shrank back. He looked around the room. The patrons were watching wide-eyed. No one moved. The weight of the guild was too heavy. Leon felt the old fear rising. The fear from Earth, the fear of being the cause of trouble, the fear of being wrong. Leon started, ready to apologize, ready to beg. Thud. A heavy glass landed on the bar, with enough force to crack the wood. "That is enough," Minnie vaulted over the bar. It wasn't a human jump. It was a predatory leap, effortless and terrifying. She landed between Leon and Corin, her boots hitting the floor with a heavy final sound. She drew herself up to her full height, 7 feet of silver fur and muscle, casting a shadow that swallowed Corin whole. "Step back, adjudicator," Minnie rumbled. Her voice was low, vibrating in the chests of everyone in the room. Corin blinked, taking a half step back instinctively. Bartender. This employee is violating the I know, Minnie interrupted. I told him to do it. Leon looked up at her shocked. Minnie. Minnie didn't look at Leon. She kept her amber eyes locked on Corin. You talk about chaos, Corin. You talk about instability. She gestured around the room. Look at my customers. Corin looked. Is anyone fighting? Minnie asked sharply. Is anyone breaking glass? Is anyone rioting? They are emotional, Corin stammered. They are talking, Minnie corrected him. They are connecting. For the first time in 10 years, the miner and the pilot are sharing a table. The insectoid is not drinking himself into a coma. If this is a riot adjudicator, then it is the most orderly riot I have ever seen. It is artificial, Corin argued, regaining his composure. It is induced by these objects. It is a trick. It is unsafe. Safety isn't feeling nothing, Minnie snapped. Safety is feeling something and knowing you're not alone in it. She took a step toward Corin, her ears flattened. Leon isn't an infection. He is the only thing in this room that is actually working. Corin's face turned red. He was losing control. The logic was failing him. The data was failing him. He felt the hum of the room, the warmth, the defiance, and it terrified him. It reminded him of the Fire Dancer Festival. It reminded him of the panic. No, Corin whispered. No, I will not let this happen again. He lunged past Minnie. He didn't go for Leon. He went for the source. He grabbed the coaster on the table, the one with the beating heart design. Corin, don't! Leon screamed. Corin's hand clamped down on the art. I am neutralizing this. He didn't just touch it. He tried to crush it. He tried to impose his will, his need for control, his fear, onto the delicate psychic structure Leon had built. It was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a spoon. The coaster flared. It didn't burn. It exploded with light. Leon gasped, clutching his head. The connection between him and his art was visceral. When Corin attacked the coaster, he attacked Leon's mind. And the dam broke. Leon's control shattered. The energy he had been carefully trickling into the coasters, the warmth, the nostalgia, the gentle sadness, was suddenly blasted open by the force of Corin's fear. A shockwave of pure emotion erupted from Leon. It wasn't invisible this time. It was a visible ripple of air, shimmering like heat haze colored with violent streaks of violet and charcoal. The memory hit everyone at once. It wasn't their memory. It was Leon's. A gallery on Earth. White walls. Beautiful paintings. But the crowd wasn't looking. They were screaming. A painting had made someone too angry. Another had made someone too sad. The emotions had bounced off each other, amplifying, spiraling, until the gallery was a brawl. Fire. Sirens. A young Leon standing in the middle, holding a brush, terrified, realizing that what he made could burn the world. Stop it, Leon screamed in the present, falling to his knees. I'm sorry. Stop it. The bar began to shake. Bottles rattled on the shelves. The lights flickered wildly. The patrons clutched their heads, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of panic and regret that wasn't theirs. Corin was thrown back against a pillar, sliding down to the floor, eyes wide, gasping. Chaos! I told you, chaos! The vortex swirled around Leon. He was the eye of the storm curled into a ball, trying to pull everything back in, trying to disappear. Leon! Minnie didn't run away. She didn't cover her ears. She dove into the storm. She hit the floor next to him, ignoring the psychic pressure that felt like a physical weight on her chest. She grabbed Leon's hands. They were ice cold. Leon, look at me! Minnie roared over the psychic wind. Leon shook his head, eyes squeezed shut. It's happening again. I'm hurting them. I have to leave. I have to stop. You cannot stop it by hiding, Minnie shouted. She gripped his hands tighter, her claws digging slightly into his skin, not to hurt, but to ground. You are not on Earth. You are in my bar. You are in my territory. She leaned in, pressing her forehead against his. Breathe, Leon, she commanded, her voice dropping to that low, resonant growl she used to break up fights. "Match my breathing. In. Out." She forced herself to be calm. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to flee to hunt. But she chose to be a rock. She chose to be the mountain root on the coaster. She projected her own feelings into the connection between them. Not fear, not anger. Protective, steadfast. The smell of lemons and clean wood. The quiet of the storage room. The way the light hit his messy hair. "I am here," Minnie whispered. "I have got you. You are safe. Use the art, Leon. Don't fight the feeling. Shape it." Leon gasped, inhaling the scent of her. The panic began to recede, replaced by the solid, unshakable presence of the wolf before him. He opened his eyes. He saw Amber. He saw Minnie. He squeezed her hands back. He took the chaotic swirl of energy, the fear, the regret, the noise, and he pushed it through the filter of Minnie's presence. The violent, violet light softened. It turned into a deep, warm gold. The shaking stopped. The wave of emotion didn't disappear, but it changed. It swept through the room, washing over everyone. But instead of panic, it brought clarity. It felt like the moment after a long cry. It felt like the silence after a thunderstorm. It was heavy, yes. It was sad, yes. But it was clean. The patrons slowly lowered their hands. They looked around, dazed. Corin was sitting on the floor, his legs splayed out in front of him. His sensory device was smoking slightly. He wasn't moving. He was staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down his face. Not tears of pain. Tears of release. Corin choked out. "I missed it." The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigeration unit, which suddenly sounded very loud. Leon slumped against Minnie, exhausted. The golden light faded, leaving only the dim gray lights of the bar, which somehow didn't look so gray anymore. Minnie didn't let go of his hands. She shifted her position, putting herself between Leon and the rest of the room, shielding him with her body. Her hackles were still raised, daring anyone to make a move. "Is everyone?" Leon whispered, his voice raspy. "Are they okay?" Minnie looked around. Korg was helping the crying woman stand up. Zill was picking up a fallen chair. People were looking at each other, really looking, with a mixture of awe and confusion. There was no anger. There was just a profound shared vulnerability. "They are alive," Minnie said softly. "They are fine." She looked at Corin. The adjudicator slowly pushed himself up to a sitting position. He looked at his hands. He looked at the crushed coaster on the floor. It was ruined, bent, and torn. He looked at Leon. There was no malice in his eyes anymore, just a terrifying, hollow kind of wonder. "You," Corin whispered. His voice was trembling. "What did you do to me? I haven't felt that since..." He couldn't finish the sentence. He looked at the ruined coaster, then back at Leon. "You broke the seal. You let it all out." "I'm sorry," Leon said instinctively. "Don't apologize." Minnie snapped, her voice cutting the silence. She stood up, pulling Leon up with her. She kept one hand firmly on his arm. She looked at the crowd. She looked at Corin. "Well," Minnie said, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "The review for the Balanced Venue label is concluded." She reached out and ripped the beige poster off the window. The sound of tearing paper was incredibly loud. She crumpled it up and tossed it onto the bar. "I think we failed," she said. No one spoke. The air was thick with the question of what would happen next. Corin was an adjudicator. He had the power to close them down. He had the power to arrest Leon. Corin stood up shakily. He smoothed his robes, but his hands were still trembling. He looked at Minnie. He looked at Leon, who was leaning against the wolf for support. "This," Corin began, his voice weak, "this is a violation of Code 714. Unregulated psychic event. Mass emotional disturbance." "Write the ticket, Corin," Minnie challenged. Corin looked at his slate. It was blank. The sensors had burned out. He looked back at the coaster on the floor. Corin took a deep breath. I need to sit down. He didn't call the guards. He didn't scream. He just walked to the nearest chair and sat down heavily, burying his face in his hands. Minnie looked at Leon. Leon looked at her. What do we do now? Leon whispered. Minnie squeezed his arm. Now, she said, we wait for the echo. The door to the bar opened. It wasn't the police. It wasn't the guild. There were more people. People from the street who had stopped walking. People who had felt the wave of golden warmth spill out onto the pavement. They were peering in, curious, drawn to the light like moths. Is this the place? Someone asked from the doorway. The place that feels real. Minnie looked at the growing crowd. She looked at Leon, who was pale but standing on his own 2 feet. Yes, Minnie said. We are open. But as she said it, she saw Corin lift his head. His eyes were clear now, and they were scared. Not for himself. For them. They won't let you keep this, Corin whispered across the room. The council. They saw the spike. They are coming. Leon straightened up. He looked at his hands still stained with ink. He looked at the people waiting in the doorway. Let them come, Leon said. It was the first time he didn't sound like he was apologizing for existing. Minnie smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Let them come, she agreed. I am not closing early tonight. The silence in the howling moon was heavy, but it was not empty. It was the kind of silence that follows a thunderclap, a vibrating charged stillness, where the air itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the echo to return. 3 days had passed since the incident on Balance Night. The Guild of Balanced Commerce had not shut them down immediately. Bureaucracy, even in a city as optimized as Lumenport, moved at the speed of a rusted cog when faced with something it could not categorize. Instead of a closure notice, they had received a yellow holographic citation that now hovered permanently over the bar counter. Under investigation for Class 4 emotional hazardous material. Probationary operation only. Leon stood behind the counter drying a glass. He had been drying the same glass for 10 minutes. His hands felt phantom light itching with the phantom weight of a pen he was forbidden to hold. The terms of the probation were strict. Leon could work, he could serve, but he could not create. No coasters, no wire sculptures, no arrangements of fruit that looked like birds. He was to be a dispenser of liquids, and nothing more. You are going to rub a hole in that glass, Minnie said. She was standing at the service station, methodically counting the inventory. She did not look up, but her left ear was swiveled toward him, tracking the repetitive squeak-squeak of his towel. I'm just making sure it's clean, Leon murmured, setting the glass down. It joined a row of 12 other glasses that were so clean they were practically invisible. It is sterile, Minnie corrected. There is a difference between clean and the sterile. Cleaning is pleasant. Sterile is what a hospital smells like before they tell you bad news. Leon looked at her. Her tone was sharp, but the usual bite was missing. In the days since she had tackled him to the floor and anchored him through the psychic storm, something had shifted in the tectonic plates of their dynamic. She stood closer to him now, not crowding him, but hovering within the radius of a bodyguard. If a customer raised their voice, Minnie's hackles would rise before the echo died away. I feel like I'm missing an arm, Leon admitted, looking down at his empty hands. I see things, Minnie. I see the way the condensation on the beer tap looks like a weeping mountain. I see the way the light hits the dust motes. And I can't let it out. It's building up behind my eyes. It gives me a headache. Then take a break, Minnie said. She reached under the counter and pulled out a small wooden box. Go to the back. Sort these. Leon frowned. What is it? Lost and found, Minnie lied. Patrons leave things. It is inefficient to leave them cluttering the service area. Leon took the box. It was heavy. He carried it to the small table in the corner of the kitchen, His old studio before the ban. He opened the lid. It wasn't lost property. Inside, nestled in scraps of velvet and packing foam, were gifts. There was a jagged piece of raw crystal, glowing with a faint internal pulse, with a note scrawled on a napkin for the mountain route. It made me remember my grandfather's voice. Korg. There was a small pouch of seeds dried and brown from photosyn 3. These only grow in soil that has been cried into. I think you understand. Thank you for the rain. There was a wrench, old and rusted, but polished to a shine on the handle where a thumb would rest. There were photographs of families long gone. There were pieces of sea glass. Leon picked up a small, smooth stone. It felt warm. They have been leaving them when I am not looking, Minnie's voice came from the doorway. She was leaning against the frame, arms crossed. Slipping them onto the counter, hiding them under napkins. I tried to stop them, citing sanitary regulations. They ignored me. Leon felt a lump form in his throat. I thought I broke everyone. I thought I hurt them. You scared them, Minnie admitted, walking over. She picked up the pouch of seeds, sniffing it delicately. But you also woke them up. In Lumenport, people spend their whole lives asleep at the wheel, Leon. Waking up is violent. It hurts your eyes. But nobody who woke up wants to go back to sleep. Corin did, Leon whispered. He looked terrified. Corin is a complication, Minnie said, her face darkening. But these people, she gestured to the box, they are not asking you to stop. They are saying thank you. You are not just a lonely boy playing with trash anymore, Leon. You are a utility. You are infrastructure. Infrastructure, Leon let out a watery laugh. That sounds romantic. In my culture, infrastructure is the highest compliment, Minnie said solemnly. It is the bridge that carries the pack over the ravine. It is the fire that keeps the frost out. She looked him in the eye. You are essential. The word hung in the air, heavier and more precious than any of the gifts in the box. Later that night, after the last patron had shuffled out into the neon gloom, Minnie did not unlock the door to let Leon leave. Put your coat on, she commanded. Not the work tunic, the heavy one. Where are we going? Leon asked, blinking sleep out of his eyes. It is 2 a.m. The city is loud during the day, Minnie said, locking the cash register. It lies to you. It tells you it is a machine. But at night the machine sleeps and you can see the ghost in the gears. You need to walk. If you do not expend this energy, you will explode, and I do not want to clean up the psychic residue. She led him out, not toward the maglev stations, but down toward the old seawall, where the lights of the commercial district faded into the dark churn of the bay. Lumenport at night was a different creature. Without the holographic ads screaming for attention, the architecture looked skeletal and strange. The wind smelled of salt and rust. They walked in silence for a long time. The only sound was the rhythmic click-clack of Minnie's claws on the pavement and Leon's shuffling steps. I need to teach you something, Minnie said suddenly, stopping by a rusted railing that overlooked the black water. Bartending, Leon asked. Survival, Minnie corrected. She turned to him, the wind ruffling her silver ruff. You have no shielding, Leon. You walk into a room and you open your chest and let everything in. That is why the storm happened on balance night. Corin pushed and you had no door to close. I don't know how to close it, Leon said, shivering slightly in the damp air. I feel everything. I always have. When I see something sad, it sticks to me. You are a filter, Minnie said. But you act like a sponge. A sponge rots if it stays wet. A filter lets the water pass through. She stepped closer. She took his hands. Her palms were rough, calloused, and incredibly warm. Close your eyes, she instructed. Leon did. Listen to the city. What do you hear? I hear the train, Leon said. I hear the water. I hear a drone buzzing somewhere. Go deeper, Minnie murmured. Use the part of you that paints. What does the train sound like? Leon focused. He didn't think about the sound waves. He thought about the feeling. "It sounds tired," Leon whispered. "It sounds like metal grinding on metal because it wants to stop, but it can't." "Good. Now do not hold it. Do not try to fix the train. Do not try to paint a picture of the train to make it feel better. Just acknowledge it. Say, 'I hear you, you are tired,' and then let it go." Leon frowned, concentrating. He visualized the tired metal. He felt the ache of it. Usually, he would try to imagine oil or a soft bed for the train. Instead, he just breathed. "I hear you," he exhaled. The ache faded, carried away by the wind. "I think I did it," Leon said, opening his eyes. "You did," Minnie said. She was smiling, a small, rare thing that softened the sharp angles of her face. "You cannot heal the whole world, Leon. If you try to drink the ocean, you will drown. You have to learn to stand on the shore." They continued walking, moving deeper into the tangle of the docks. They passed an abandoned warehouse, where bioluminescent vines had broken through the concrete, creating a natural glowing mural on the wall. "This is inefficient," Minnie said, pointing at the vines. "The roots are compromising the structural integrity of the wall. It serves no purpose." "It's beautiful," Leon said. "Yes," Minnie agreed softly. "It is." She stopped, leaning against a lamppost that flickered with a dying bulb. The light cast long, shifting shadows across her face. "Leon," she started, and her voice had a weight to it that made Leon stop breathing. "There is something I have not told you, about why I am here, in Lumenport." Leon waited. He had sensed vaguely that Minnie was overqualified for pouring beer in a dive bar. "My pack, the Starwolves of Fenris, we have a long memory," Minnie began, looking out at the dark water. "We remember the wars before the Federation. We remember the weapons," she paused. "We have stories about your kind, not just humans, but weavers, people who could pull on the strings of the mind." Leon went cold. "Monsters. Weapons," Minnie corrected. "The stories say a weaver can turn an army into a mob of weeping children, or drive a city to madness with a single song. We fear loss of control above all else. When the pack loses its mind, the pack dies." She turned to face him fully. "We have watchers, scouts. We monitor the shipping lanes. 3 months ago, a report came in. A human with a high-grade psychic resonance signature was immigrating to Lumenport. A potential weaver." Leon took a step back. "Me?" "You," Minnie nodded. "I volunteered for the assignment. My orders were to infiltrate, observe, and assess the threat level." She hesitated, her ears flattening against her skull. "And if the threat level exceeded the safety parameters, I was to neutralize it." The word hung between them sharp as a knife. Neutralize. It didn't mean fire. It didn't mean arrest. "You were sent to kill me," Leon whispered. "I was sent to stop a catastrophe," Minnie said, her voice hard defensive. "I expected a warlord. I expected a fanatic. I expected someone who wanted to use their power to enslave." She took a step toward him, but Leon stayed frozen. "Instead," Minnie said, her voice breaking, "I found a boy who apologizes to the furniture. I found a boy who spends his wages on glue to fix things that belong in the trash. I found someone who looked at a city that hates him and tried to give it a present." "You lied to me," Leon said. He felt a sting in his eyes that had nothing to do with the wind. "Every day, when we were working, when you helped me with the inventory, you were just measuring me for a coffin." "At first," Minnie said fiercely. "Yes, it was a job. I am a hunter, Leon. That is what I was made for." She reached out, grabbing the lapels of his coat, pulling him closer. He could have pulled away, but he didn't. "But then I saw the coaster, the wolf, the one you made of me. The one that smelled like safety," Leon whispered. "No," Minnie shook her head, her golden eyes burning. "The one that smelled like me. Not the hunter, not the killer. You saw me. You saw the part of me I thought I had scrubbed away in the nursery cave. And I realized the stories were wrong. You are not a weapon. You are a mirror. You show people what they are afraid to look at." She let go of his coat, stepping back, looking suddenly vulnerable. "I have not sent a report in weeks," she confessed. "My pack is calling. They want to know why I have not neutralized the target. I stopped answering them." Leon looked at her. He saw the tension in her shoulders. She had cut ties with her own people, her own nature, to protect him. "Why?" Leon asked. "Because," Minnie said, looking down at her claws, "I realized that if I neutralized you, the world would just go back to being gray. And I do not think I can live in the gray anymore." Leon let out a shaky breath. He should be angry. He should be terrified. But strangely, all he felt was a profound sense of recognition. "I know what it's like," Leon said softly. "To be afraid of what you can do." He turned away, looking at the city lights. "Back on Earth," Leon said, his voice hollow. "I was an art student. I was good. Too good. I didn't understand the resonance then. There was a protest. A political rally. People were angry about the housing crisis. I wanted to help. I painted a mural on the barricade. I poured everything I felt into it, the rage, the injustice, the heat." He wrapped his arms around himself. "It worked too well, Minnie. People looked at it and they didn't just get inspired. They got rabid. They lost their minds. The rage amplified. It turned into a riot. 3 blocks burned down. 12 people were hospitalized." He looked at her, his eyes wide and haunted. "That's why I came here. That's why I chose Lumenport. Because this place hates emotion. I thought if I lived in a place made of ice, I couldn't start a fire." Minnie stared at him. The pieces clicked into place. His clumsiness, his hesitation, his desperate need to keep his art small, to make it out of trash. He wasn't just shy. He was traumatized. He was a loaded gun trying to convince everyone he was a water pistol. "You were wrong," Minnie said firmly. "I almost hurt Corin," Leon argued. "I almost started another riot." "Almost," Minnie emphasized. "But you didn't. Because you are not alone this time." She stepped back into his space, her presence encompassing him like a shield. "On Earth you were a child playing with fire. Here you have a firebreak. I am your firebreak, Leon. You pour the emotion. I will build the walls to hold it. We do it together. Or we do not do it at all." Leon looked up at the giant wolf woman. For the first time since he left Earth, the knot of fear in his chest loosened. "Together," he repeated. It sounded like a promise. The next day, the bar was closed for prep. The town hall meeting, the community dialogue on psychic hygiene, was scheduled for that evening. The guild had granted a special dispensation for the Howling Moon to host it, mostly because no other venue wanted to deal with the potential liability. At noon, the door chimed. Minnie looked up from the bar, her hand instinctively dropping to the stun baton she kept under the counter. It was Corin. He looked different. He was not wearing his pristine adjudicator robes. He was wearing a simple gray tunic and his face was unshaven. He looked like a man who had not slept, but who had spent the night thinking very hard. "We are closed, adjudicator," Minnie said, though her voice was wary rather than hostile. "I know," Corin said. His voice was raspy. He walked to the bar. He did not look at the nutritional charts. He looked at Leon, who was freezing near the kitchen door. "I did not come to inspect," Corin said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain white cardboard coaster. He placed it on the bar. "I need a dose," Corin said. Leon stepped forward slowly. "A dose." "I cannot sleep," Corin admitted. He sat on a stool, slumping slightly. "Since that night the silence has been too loud. I close my eyes, and I see the gray. It is suffocating." He looked up at Leon, and his eyes were wet. "I used to be a musician," Corin said softly. "Before the guild, before the balance. I played the cello. I loved it. But I played a piece once, a requiem, and My mother started crying and couldn't stop for 3 days. I thought I broke her. He looked at his hands. So I joined the guild. I thought if I controlled everything, no one would ever hurt like that again. Leon walked to the bar. He looked at the white coaster. You want me to draw? Leon asked. I want you to show me that it can be safe, Corin whispered. Make me something quiet. Something that is not a storm. Please. Leon looked at Minnie. She nodded. A small, almost imperceptible dip of her chin. I am here. I am the wall. Leon reached into his pocket and pulled out his pen. He sat down next to Corin. Give me your hand, Leon said. Corin hesitated, then placed his trembling hand on the bar. Leon placed his own hand over it, not touching, just hovering. Breathe, Leon said. He began to draw. He didn't use colors this time. He used simple black ink. He didn't draw a nebula or a mountain. He drew a chair. A simple, sturdy wooden chair sitting in a patch of sunlight. As he drew, he focused. He didn't pour in joy or sadness. He poured in stillness. He poured in the feeling of sitting down after a long walk. He poured in the feeling of Minnie's hand on his shoulder. He felt the energy rising, the familiar hum of the resonance. He felt it, trying to spike, trying to become a wave. Steady, Minnie's voice echoed in his head, though she hadn't spoken. He felt her presence behind him, grounding him, anchoring him to the floor. Leon exhaled. He channeled the energy into the lines of the chair. He finished the last stroke. Touch it, Leon whispered. Corin reached out. His finger brushed the ink. He didn't gasp. He didn't cry. He just stopped shaking. His shoulders dropped. The tension that had held his body rigid for 20 years seemed to evaporate. He closed his eyes and took a breath that went all the way to the bottom of his lungs. Oh, Corin breathed. It is just quiet. It's a place to rest, Leon said softly. Not a cage. Just a chair. Corin opened his eyes. He looked at Leon with a profound, terrifying gratitude. You could have destroyed me, Corin said. On balance night. You had the power to break my mind, but you didn't. I don't want to break people, Leon said. I just want them to feel okay. Corin picked up the coaster. He held it like it was made of diamond. They are going to come for you tonight, Corin warned, his voice low. The guildmasters, the hardliners. They want to ban you. They want to exile you. I know, Leon said. I cannot stop them alone, Corin said, standing up. But I will not testify against you. And I will tell them that the chaos was mine, not yours. He nodded to Minnie, a gesture of respect between equals, and walked out of the bar. Twilight fell. The street outside the Howling Moon began to fill with people. It wasn't just the regulars. It was half the district. There were supporters holding homemade signs painted with colorful swirls. There were detractors, people in gray suits holding placards that read, "Order is safety," and "No unauthorized emotions." Inside, the air was stifling. Leon stood on the rooftop terrace looking down at the gathering crowd. The wind was whipping his hair into a frenzy. They're going to ban me, Leon said. He wasn't asking. He was stating a fact. Even with Corin, the fear is too big. Minnie stood beside him, her silhouette dark against the rising moons. If they ban you, Minnie said, what will you do? Leon gripped the railing. I thought about running. I thought about finding a rock in the middle of nowhere and just existing. He turned to her. But I can't stop drawing, Minnie. I tried. For 3 days I tried. And I felt like I was dying. If I have to leave, I'll go to the fringe. I'll go to the lawless sectors. I'll draw on the hulls of wrecked ships if I have to. The fringe is dangerous, Minnie noted. The gravity is unstable. The food is terrible. I know, Leon said. He looked at her, his heart pounding. I'm not asking you to come. You have a life here. You have the bar. You have safety. Minnie laughed. It was a low, barking sound. Safety, she scoffed. Safety is boring. I told you, Leon. I do not like the gray anymore. She stepped closer, invading his personal space, in that proprietary way of hers. She reached out and fixed the collar of his coat, her claws brushing the skin of his neck. "If you go to the fringe," Minnie said casually, "you will need a bodyguard. Someone to keep the scavengers away, while you are busy staring at dust motes." "You'd leave?" Leon asked, breathless. "You'd leave the Howling Moon for me?" "I would leave the Howling Moon for a change of scenery," Minnie lied, but her eyes were soft. "I would leave with you because I find it very annoying to train new bartenders. And because," she paused. The sarcasm dropped away. "Because if you are the weaver," Minnie whispered, "then I am the thread. You cannot make the tapestry without me." Leon reached out and took her hand. It was huge, covered in fur, and dangerous. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever held. "Okay," Leon said. "Together." "Together," Minnie confirmed. "Hey, lovebirds!" a voice shouted from the stairwell. It was Korg. "The guildmasters are here and they brought the High Council drones. Get down here before they start scanning the beer." Minnie sighed, the moment broken, but the connection remained. Time to face the pack. They walked down the stairs, side by side. The main room of the Howling Moon had been transformed into a tribunal. A long table had been set up at the front, occupied by 3 severe-looking guildmasters and several hovering surveillance drones. The rest of the room was packed. Zill was there. Korg was there. The plant girl was there. Corin sat to the side, looking pale but determined. Leon walked behind the bar, standing next to Minnie. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a pen. He just had his hands resting on the wood of the counter. "This session is in order," the head guildmaster announced. She was a woman with skin like parchment and eyes like calculators. "We are here to determine the fate of the entity known as Leon and the disposition of the Class 4 hazardous materials he produces." "It's not hazardous material," a voice shouted from the back. It was the woman with the grease-stained hands. "It's healing." "Order," the guildmaster banged a gavel. "We will hear testimony." The debate began. It was heated. The Balance faction argued that Leon was a walking instability, a relic of a chaotic past that humanity had evolved beyond. The supporters argued that a life without feeling was just a slow death. Corin stood up and spoke. He spoke of his own fear and how the art had grounded him. It moved some people, but the guildmasters looked unimpressed. They looked at their data slates, at the risk projections. "The data is conclusive," the headmaster said, finally cutting off a speech by Zill. "While the intent may be benign, the potential for catastrophe is statistically significant. We cannot allow an unregulated weaver to operate within the city limits. The risk of a resonance cascade is too high." She looked at Leon. "Leon of Earth, you are hereby ordered to cease all creative production immediately. Failure to comply will result in exile to the penal colonies." Leon took a breath. He looked at Minnie. She nodded. He opened his mouth to speak. To tell them that he would leave, that he would take his art where they couldn't control it. But before he could say a word, the front door of the bar slammed open. It wasn't the wind. A figure stood in the doorway. It was an elderly human woman. She was small, hunched over a cane, dressed in travel-worn clothes that smelled of engine grease and old paint. Her hair was white wild and tied back with a piece of colorful wire. The room fell silent. Even the guildmasters looked up confused. Leon froze. He knew that silhouette. He knew the smell of turpentine and peppermint that suddenly drifted through the room. The old woman walked forward, the crowd parting for her instinctively. She walked right up to the tribunal table, leaned her cane against it, and looked the head guild master in the eye. "You're making a mistake, Martha," the old woman croaked. Her voice was like sandpaper, rough and scraping. "Who are you?" the guild master demanded. "This is a closed hearing." "I'm the one who sent him here," the old woman said. She turned slowly, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Leon. Leon felt the blood drain from his face. "Professor Alara," Leon whispered. It was his art teacher, the one from Earth, the one who had bundled him onto the transport ship after the riot, telling him to run to find a safe place. Alara smiled. It wasn't a sweet smile. It was a sharp, calculating smile that reminded Leon terrifyingly of the way a general looks at a map. "Hello, Leon," Alara said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a data slate. It bore the seal of the Intergalactic Council, a level of authority far above the Lumenport guilds. "I think," Alara said, her voice ringing out in the silent bar, "it's time we told them the truth about why you're really here, and why the Balance Guild has been receiving funding from my organization for the last 6 months to keep an eye on you." Leon stared at her. He stared at Corin, who looked confused. He stared at Minnie. Minnie's ears were flat against her head. She was growling a low, subsonic rumble. "She is lying," Minnie whispered to Leon. "She smells like a trap." "Trap?" Leon asked, his voice trembling. "She doesn't smell like a teacher," Minnie hissed. "She smells like a handler." Alara tapped the data slate on the table. "He isn't a hazard, Martha," Alara said to the guildmaster. "He's a prototype, and you don't exile a prototype just because it starts working." The room erupted into whispers. Leon stood paralyzed behind the bar, the warmth of Minnie's hand the only thing keeping him upright. He had thought he was a runaway. He had thought he was a mistake. But as he looked at Alara's cold, triumphant eyes, he realized the terrifying truth. He hadn't escaped. He had been deployed. The revelation hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, acrid and choking. Professor Alara stood before the tribunal, her posture rigid, her eyes bright with the cold, intellectual fervor that Leon remembered from the lecture halls on Earth. But back then, those eyes had looked at him with encouragement. Now they looked at him like a biologist looking at a successful petri dish. "A prototype," Leon repeated. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. He gripped the edge of the bar, his knuckles turning white. "I'm a person, Alara, not a piece of hardware." "You are a weaving-class psi-active entity," Alara corrected him, her tone clinical. She gestured to the stunned guildmasters. "The Intergalactic Council has been looking for a way to bridge the emotional isolationism of the trade sectors. We needed to know if a weaver could function in a high-stress, low-empathy environment like Lumenport without causing a psychotic break in the population. You were the perfect candidate, talented, empathetic, and desperate enough to run where we pointed you." She smiled, and it was meant to be comforting, but it was terrifying. "And you succeeded, Leon. You didn't just survive. You created a resonance network. The data we have harvested from the surveillance feeds in this bar is revolutionary." Leon felt the room spinning. The crate of coasters in the back, the late nights mixing drinks the moment he thought he had found a sanctuary. It was all a test chamber. He wasn't a runaway finding a home. He was a lab rat finding the cheese. "Surveillance feeds," Leon whispered. He looked up at the ceiling at the innocent-looking light fixtures. "You've been watching me the whole time." "For your protection," Alara said soothingly. "And for the data." A low, vibrating growl started from deep within Minnie's chest. It wasn't the warning growl she used for drunk patrons. It was a tectonic rumble, the sound of an apex predator realizing its territory had been violated. "You!" Minnie stepped forward, moving out from behind the bar. Her movements were stiff, her hackles raised so high they brushed the bottom of her ears. "You are the one who has been blocking my transmission signals." Alara looked at the giant wolf, unimpressed. "The council needed a clean control group. We couldn't have the Fenris pack interfering." "Interfering," Minnie's voice rose to a bark. "You call it interference. I call it redundancy." Minnie turned to the crowd. She turned to Leon. And for the first time since Leon had met her, the great stoic wolf looked afraid. Not of the guild, but of the words she was about to speak. "She is not the only one who was watching you, Leon," Minnie said. Her voice was rough, stripping the gears of her throat. Leon looked at her. He felt a cold dread pooling in his stomach. "Minnie, what do you mean?" Minnie took a breath, inhaling the scent of the bar, the stale beer, the fear, the ozone. "The Starwolves do not trust the Council," she said, addressing the room, but looking only at Leon. "When we intercepted the intelligence that a Weaver was being deployed to Lumenport, the High Pack did not see an experiment. They saw a weapon that could destabilize the trade routes." She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. They were liquid gold, filled with misery. "I was not sent here to be a bartender," Minnie confessed. "I was deployed as a containment unit. My orders were to observe you, to test your volatility." She paused, and the silence was deafening. "And if you showed signs of losing control like you did on Earth, I was authorized to neutralize the threat." The word neutralize landed with the weight of a coffin lid. Leon took a step back. He bumped into the shelves of glasses, the sound of crystal, chiming softly in the quiet room. He looked at Alara, the teacher, who had turned him into a project. He looked at Minnie, the partner who had been measuring him for a grave. "So it was all fake," Leon whispered. His voice broke, fracturing into jagged pieces. "The job, the protection, the walks on the pier. You were just waiting for me to snap." "No," Minnie shouted, stepping toward him. "That was the mission. That was not me." "How can I tell the difference?" Leon yelled back. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice at her. "You lied to me. Everyone lied to me. My whole life here, it's just a script you people wrote." He felt the familiar burn of the resonance building behind his eyes, the hot violet pressure of betrayal. But this time, he didn't want to paint it. He wanted to scream it. He felt like a puppet whose strings had just been pulled too tight. "I'm leaving," Leon said. He untied his apron, his hands shaking so hard, he almost ripped the fabric. "I'm done being a prototype. I'm done being a target. You can have your data. You can have your bar." He started to walk toward the door. The crowd parted. No one stopped him. Corin stood up, looking stricken. Alara looked annoyed, tapping her data slate, as if calculating the loss of the asset. "Leon, wait!" Minnie howled, a sound of pure desperation. Leon didn't stop. He reached the door. "He saved my marriage!" The shout came from the back of the room. It was the elderly man from the couple Leon had served on balance night. Leon paused, his hand on the doorframe. "My wife and I," the man continued, his voice trembling but loud. "We hadn't spoken about our son in 20 years. It was too hard. We were efficient. We were silent." He held up a coaster, the one with the binary sunset. "Then he gave us this, and we cried. And we talked. You can call him a prototype, lady. You can call him a weapon. But I call him the reason I still have a wife. He helped me too." It was the grease-stained woman. She stepped forward, glaring at Alara. "I don't care who sent him. I don't care if he was a lab rat. The flower he drew, it made me remember that I'm not just a mechanic. I'm a gardener. Nobody ordered me to feel that. I felt it." "And the mountain root," Korg, the miner, rumbled, standing up like a boulder taking human shape. He looked at Minnie. "You might have been sent to kill him, Wolf. But you didn't. You stood between him and the adjudicator. That wasn't an order. That was a choice." One by one, the voices rose. They weren't debating policy. They were testifying to reality. Zill, the insectoid, climbed onto a table. "I was drinking to forget," he clicked. "Leon made me drink to remember. That is not data. That is life." Leon stood at the door, his back to the room. He was crying. Silent, hot tears that tracked through the dust on his face. He heard them. He felt them. Alara had sent him to be a bridge. Minnie had been sent to be a bomb squad. But the people had just needed a bartender who listened. The manipulation was real. The lies were real. But the connection. The connection was the only thing that wasn't scripted. "Sit down, Leon," a voice said gently. It was Corin. The adjudicator walked over to Leon and placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't try to pull him back. He just offered an anchor. "They used you," Corin said, his voice low enough that only Leon could hear. "They used me too. The guild, the council. They use everyone." He turned Leon around to face the room. "But look at them. Look at what you made. You can walk out that door, and you will be free of the lies. But you will also be leaving the truth behind." Leon looked. He saw the faces of the people he had served. He saw the box of gifts on the counter, the seed, the wrench, the crystal. He looked at Minnie. She was standing in the middle of the room looking utterly defeated. Her ears were drooping, her tail tucked. She looked like she was waiting for him to leave so she could finally shatter. Leon took a deep breath. It shuddered in his chest. "I hate this," Leon said to the room. "I hate that I was a test." He walked back toward the bar. He didn't go to Alara. He didn't go to Minnie. He went to his spot behind the counter. He picked up his drying towel. "But," Leon said, looking at Alara, "the test is over. I'm not working for the council anymore." He looked at Minnie. "And I'm not a target anymore." He slammed the towel onto the wood. "I'm the bartender," Leon stated. "And this is my bar." The room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was cheering. It was stomping. It was a chaotic, messy, inefficient roar of approval. Corin walked to the front of the room, raising his hands. It took a full minute for the noise to die down. He looked at the guildmasters, then at Professor Alara. "We have heard the testimony," Corin said, his voice possessing a new, quiet authority. "And we have seen the evidence. The question is not whether Leon is a weaver. The question is how we integrate that reality into Lumenport." He picked up the white coaster Leon had drawn for him, the simple chair. "We cannot ban emotion," Corin said. "We tried. It made us brittle. But we cannot have chaos either. The Fire Dancer Festival failed because it had no boundaries." He turned to the head guildmaster. "I propose a new classification," Corin said. "Not a balanced venue. A designated residence zone. We label the Howling Moon. We put a warning on the door. Entry may cause emotional vulnerability. Proceed with open heart." He looked at Leon. "Leon will agree to limits. No broadcasting to the street. No non-consensual projection. And," Corin paused, looking at Minnie, "he will require a permanent safety officer. Someone trained to detect psychic spikes. Someone capable of grounding the energy if it exceeds safety parameters." Minnie's head snapped up. "I volunteer," she said instantly. "You are a spy," Alara interjected coldly. "You are compromised." "I am the only one who can stop him without hurting him," Minnie snarled. She turned to Leon. "I know his frequency. I know his smell. I know the difference between his art and his panic." She looked at Leon, pleading. "I resign from the High Pack," Minnie declared. "I resign from the mission. I answer only to the venue." The head guild master looked at the data slate, then at the crowd, then at Alara. Alara shrugged, realizing her experiment had evolved beyond her control. "Very well," the guild master sighed. "The classification is approved. Probationary status is lifted pending the installation of proper signage. But make no mistake." She pointed a finger at Leon. "One riot, one single instance of mass hysteria, and we will turn this building into a parking lot." "Understood," Leon said. "Meeting adjourned," Corin announced. He slammed his hand on the table, not with a gavel, but with a satisfying, fleshy thud. It took hours for the bar to clear out. People wanted to shake Leon's hand. They wanted to touch Minnie's fur, which she allowed with great reluctance, and only 2 low growls. Alara left without a goodbye, just a nod that acknowledged the data had been interesting, if not the outcome she expected. Finally, the door clicked shut. The warning sign, a holographic projection of a heart inside a yellow triangle, hummed softly in the window. Leon and Minnie were alone. Leon was wiping the counter. He was always wiping the counter. It was the only thing that made his hands stop shaking. Minnie stood at the far end of the bar near the taps. She hadn't moved closer to him since the meeting ended. The silence between them wasn't the warm silence of the night walks. It was brittle. It was the silence of two people who had seen each other naked, not physically, but spiritually, and were now trying to figure out where to look. "You should go home," Leon said, not looking up. "Shift is over." "I have nowhere to go," Minnie said quietly. "I resigned. My transport privileges are revoked. The pack will not send a retrieval ship for a traitor." Leon stopped wiping. He looked at her. "You really resigned just like that?" "It was not just like that," Minnie said. "It was the only logical calculation. The variable was you." She walked slowly toward him, her claws clicking on the floorboards. She stopped 3 feet away, the exact distance of a standard social interaction, not the intimacy of a partner. "I am sorry," Minnie said, "for the lies, for the watching." "I get it," Leon said. He felt tired, bone-deep tired. "I was a job. I was a threat. You were protecting your people." "That is why I started," Minnie corrected. "That is not why I stayed." She reached into her pocket, the pocket of her leather apron, which she had put back on immediately after the meeting. She pulled out a small, crumpled object. It was the first coaster, the one of the silver wolf. The edges were worn soft as if it had been held and held and held. "You drew this," Minnie said, placing it on the counter between them. "And you saw me. You didn't see a spy. You didn't see a monster. You saw a guardian." She touched the drawing with one claw. "I wanted to be the person in this picture, Leon. More than I wanted to be a star wolf. More than I wanted to go home." Leon looked at the drawing. He remembered the night he made it. The smell of cinnamon and ozone. The feeling of safety. "You said I was dangerous," Leon whispered. "Back when we first met. You were right." "Yes." Minnie stepped closer. She broke the 3-foot barrier. She leaned in her golden eyes, searching his face. "You are dangerous. You make people remember things they want to bury. You make corrupt adjudicators cry. You make efficient wolves resign from their packs." She let out a breath, a puff of warm air that ruffled Leon's hair. "You are extremely dangerous to people who hate themselves, Leon. Because you make them stop." Leon looked up at her. He saw the predator, yes, but he saw the fierce, unyielding loyalty that lay beneath the fur. He saw the partner who had jumped into a psychic storm for him. "And you?" Leon asked. "Are you dangerous?" "Oh, absolutely," Minnie grinned, and her sharp teeth glinted in the dim light. "If anyone tries to hurt you, or the art, or the feelings in this bar, I will be catastrophic." She reached out and took the rag from his hand. She tossed it into the sink. "Stop cleaning," she commanded. "The bar is sterile enough." "What do we do then?" Leon asked, his hands feeling empty again. "We work," Minnie said. "But not serving drinks." She grabbed his hand. Her grip was firm, rough, and real. She pulled him toward the back of the bar, toward the storage room where it had all began. But she didn't stop there. She led him out the back door into the alley and back around to the side of the building. There was a wall there, a large, blank expanse of gray permacrete that faced the ocean. It was ugly. It was efficient. It was the perfect symbol of Lumenport. Minnie let go of his hand and pointed at the wall. "The council said you can create," Minnie said. "They said you need a designated zone. I think the inside is too small." Leon looked at the wall. It was massive. It was terrifying. "That's a lot of space," Leon swallowed. "I don't have enough paint." "We have mud," Minnie said. "We have chalk. We have that weird fluorescent grease from the kitchen trap." She looked at him. "And we have time. We have all the time in the world. No efficiency quotas." Leon stepped up to the wall. He touched the rough concrete. He could feel the resonance humming in his fingertips, eager waiting. He saw the shapes already, not a plan, but a feeling. A swirl of wind, a pair of hands. A wolf running through the stars. He looked back at Minnie. She was standing there watching him, not as a spy, not as a boss, but as infrastructure, the foundation he could build on. "I can't do it alone," Leon said. "It's too big." "I know," Minnie said. She took off her apron. She walked up to the wall, standing next to him. She looked at her large, clumsy, clawed hands. "I cannot draw, Leon. I was told my hands are for killing." "Your hands are for whatever you want them to be," Leon said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick marker, one of the contraband ones he had hidden. He held it out to her. "Teach me," Minnie whispered. Her voice was small, the voice of the pup in the cave who had drawn a blue moon. "Teach me to make something useless," Leon smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was a bright, dazzling smile that lit up the alley, better than any neon sign. "It's easy," Leon said. He took her hand and placed the marker in her grip. He guided her hand to the wall. "You just close your eyes. You feel what hurts. And then you let it out." "Like this?" Minnie asked, making a hesitant, jagged line. "Perfect," Leon said. "Now add a circle." They stood there in the dark, the human and the wolf illuminated only by the distant glow of the moons and the faint phosphorescence of the sea. They drew. They drew crooked lines and wobbly circles. They drew laughter and fear and the smell of rain. They drew a mess. And as the night deepened, the wall ceased to be a wall. It became a door that didn't lead to another room or another world, but to each other. The image on the wall grew a chaotic, sprawling mural of overlapping lines. In the center, crudely drawn but unmistakable, were two figures. One small and messy, one large and fierce. They weren't standing back to back fighting the world. They were standing side by side, holding up the sky. It was inefficient. It generated no revenue. It served no function. It was the most important thing in the city. Minnie stepped back, wiping a smear of blue chalk from her nose. She looked at their masterpiece. "It is crooked," she critiqued. "The perspective is flawed." "It's beautiful," Leon said, bumping his shoulder against hers. Minnie looked down at him. She wrapped an arm around his shoulders, pulling him into the warmth of her side. "Yes," the alien wolf bartender agreed, looking at the useless, wonderful art. "It is." The wind from the bay picked up, carrying the scent of salt and change. High above, the maglev trains hissed through the night, carrying people who were asleep. But down here in the alley behind the howling moon, two people were awake. And for the first time in 100 years, they had nothing to hide. The end.